times, just to set the context for the conversation today. I'll share a little bit about the candidate profile, so specifically what I look for when I'm combing through hundreds of resumes, trying to find top talent. Then we'll get a little bit into interview scorecards, so the things that I test for when I'm hiring, and all of that boils down into what we're calling the winning formula. So how to make sure that you are building an incredible team of SDRs that's going to help you grow your business. So first, just a little bit about me. So my name is Meagan. I'm the Director of Global Sales Development for Shutterstock. Shutterstock is hopefully a brand that you're all familiar with, but if you are not, we are a leading global creative platform. We provide images, videos, music, creative services to businesses worldwide. And I actually started my journey as an SDR not that long ago at a small Toronto tech startup. And now I am leading a global team of 32 SDRs for Shutterstock, located in London, Berlin, Singapore, New York, and Toronto. So not much sleep happening with all those different time zones, but tons of fun, amazing people that I get to work with every day. And through this experience in building this team, I have had the opportunity to see hundreds, maybe even thousands at this point, of SDR resumes, have lots of different hiring conversations with hundreds of people, and have had the opportunity to hire about 50 people into Shutterstock over the past few years that I've been building out this team. And I've learned a lot through that experience along the way that I am really, really excited to share with you a little bit today. So hiring in turbulent times. So it's been a bit of a crazy year so far, 2020. There are a number of external factors that are changing how we hire, that as SDR leadership, it is so important that we acknowledge and consider as we're framing up the considerations that we're building into our hiring framework. The first thing is that we are getting more applicants than ever, and you guys are probably seeing this firsthand every day. I think there was a Bridge Group report that went out a couple weeks ago that said, we used to get 17 inbound SDR applications a month, and now we're getting 72 applications every single day. So of course, this puts extra pressure to be able to comb through those in an efficient way and really make sure that the interviews that you are prioritizing are going to be with candidates that are going to be the top talent for your business. Also, because we are in this remote situation, your hiring pool has now opened up to the entire world. So you've got the world at your fingertips, and you really need to make sure that you're sussing out that top talent early on. Remote work is our future. Top companies are going to be looking at how they integrate work from home policies into their futures, no matter what, even in a post-COVID world. And so with that, we need to make sure that we are hiring people that can function in a work from home setting. Making a cold call alone in your basement is a lot different and a lot harder than maybe making a cold call with your buddies in the sales aisles. So we really need to consider this when it comes to the types of people that we're looking to bring onto our teams. Beyond that, this should have always been the case. Diversity is a priority. It should have always been, but now more than ever, top companies are really looking for ways to make sure that they are including diversity in their hiring practices. And through having a really solid SDR hiring framework, it's going to allow us to make sure that we rid ourselves of some of those unconscious biases that might seep into our hiring processes. And then fourth thing, of course, we're all under quite a bit of financial pressure. The economy, it's not doing too great right now. And we need to make sure that the people that we are bringing into our business are going to allow us to, first of all, they need to ramp really quickly so that we can hit the ground running. And ultimately, we're not going to make any of those bad hires that might detract from our growth as we're recovering from this really crazy time in the world. So let's get into things, talking first about the candidate profile. So, you're an SDR leader, you're getting, 72 applications a day now. So what exactly do you look for when you're first considering the types of people that you might hire from your team? And in my experience in building amazing teams, there really are sort of 4 criteria that I look for right off the bat, integrated into my hiring practices. Of course, there's lots of exceptions to these rules. It's not always that simple. For example, the first one, I look for people that attended business school. I've had amazing people on my team that haven't attended business school, but I have noticed that there is a pattern where if you did attend business school, that you're likely going to integrate and understand the broader picture of the business a lot faster than maybe who doesn't have that background. On top of that, people who went to business school get really great experience working in collaborative teams. And we all know that having a really strong community and being able to work together is a really, really important foundation of building really solid SDR groups. So I'd love to look for people that attended business school as the first thing. The second thing, and again, a bit controversial because I know that there's a lot of people out there that love to hire SDRs straight out of school so that they can mold the talent in whatever way they want. But I actually look for people that have 1 year of professional experience. The reason behind this is because I think when you're first graduating school, a lot of the time you're just looking for a job. And I find if I get people after they've already been integrated into the workforce for a year, that they usually put a little bit more thought into what they want for a career. So I really do look for people that have, at least 1 year of professional experience. And it also gives them a little bit of that extra emotional maturity to be able to function successfully within a workplace. The third thing is I look for sales-related experience. This doesn't mean that they had to have done another SDR role before, but I'm looking for people that have had experience in similar sort of sales style environments. An example of this could be maybe somebody who worked for an experiential marketing company. I love the people who can get out there and hustle, maybe giving samples or products, aren't afraid to start conversations. This is definitely, something that I've seen on people's resumes that has translated into helping them be really, really successful SDRs. And the fourth thing is I look for a strong LinkedIn presence. And again, as SDR leaders, you guys know, I think 2 things here. One, we know that social selling is an incredible channel for SDRs to develop their own inbound leads. So having that solid foundation, even before they join the team, really is going to give them a leg up when it comes to their prospecting. But 2, having a strong LinkedIn presence really just indicates to me that you understand the modern world of selling and being a business person. And that is just really, really important in terms of the skill set and the intelligence of the people that we're bringing onto our teams. So those are the first 4 things that I would suggest that you look for as you're combing through these resumes. And hopefully, once you've gone through the piles and stacks of resumes, you're able to use these 4 things to really dwindle down a little bit further and get to the point where you can actually invite some people in for an interview. And that is where the interview scorecard comes into play. So within the interview scorecard that I've developed as a framework, I have primary and secondary criteria. The primary criteria, those are going to be the non-negotiables. I need to make sure that every single person that I bring onto my team just knocks it out of the park on these types of criteria. And then there's some additional secondary criteria that I've also found correlate with success within an SDR function, but maybe aren't as high priority. So they're a good sort of area in my interview process where, some SDR candidates could get a few bonus points, but they're not total deal breakers. So the first thing in the primary criteria, I want to make sure that every single SDR that I hire has a strong desire to be in sales. And I do that quite simply just by asking them, why do you want to be in sales? And things that I look for in answers around that are people that are motivated by reward or achievement. Lots of people before they come in for an SDR interview, they'll just Google, how do you succeed at an SDR interview? And they'll say things like, oh, you just have to be competitive. So they'll just talk about how they're competitive or how they played sports. So you can really learn by digging a bit deeper into this bucket to really understand the true motivation. And, I think that's the number one thing that I've seen be the true driver of success in terms of criteria and best hiring practices. The second thing is I look for a history of excellence. So again, a lot of these people that you guys are going to be hiring on your teams, they don't necessarily have relevant sales experience from prior jobs. But we want to make sure that we're hiring winners. So I look for people that have maybe received scholarships, received awards. I love when I see that people are on the dean's list, things like that. That really indicates to me that they care, that they're dedicated to their work. And are ultimately going to bring that attitude and that mentality into my team. Third, I look for curiosity. So this is something that is a non-negotiable. I think either you're born curious or you're not. It's an innate quality that cannot be coached. So if it's not there, I really don't have much of a future for you on the team. So super important to be making sure that they're curious. A lot of this I'll test for in actually the questions that they ask me at the end of the interview and how they ask those questions. Are they just reading from a list of questions that they've pre-prepared, or are they listening to the things that I'm saying and asking really strong probing questions? I look for coachability. Again, super important. There's a lot of things that they just won't know when they join us. And we want to make sure that we're able to coach, to teach, to mentor, and that information is going to be sinking in a really constructive way. I actually test for this in a presentation format. So they'll do a little presentation, a little prospecting exercise. I'll give them some feedback. And if they're able to apply that feedback in any way throughout the rest of the presentation or even later in the cold call portion of the interview process, then it'll show their strong ability to process that information and apply it really quickly. Fifth, probably one of the most important things, especially these days, is just having grit. Being able to understand that there's long-term goals, long-term vision, and persevere amongst some of those tough moments, knowing that ultimately we're shooting for something much greater here is just a really important quality to look for in your candidates. And sixth is cultural fit. Super important to make sure that every single person that you're bringing onto your team has alignment when it comes to core values. You guys know, you get a bad hire, they can literally throw off your entire team dynamic just like that. So super important to be able to test for this early on to avoid that. Moving on to secondary criteria. So again, they're not the non-negotiables, but they're just important considerations and sort of an opportunity for candidates to get a few extra bonus points in the interview process. Again, looking for that relevant sales experience. So I love to actually hire people. Some of my most successful SDRs were actually starting in sales roles in the financial services industry. And then we're looking to move into a little bit more of a dynamic space. So just having that foundation I find to be really beneficial. Second thing is relevant domain experience. So I look for people that understand why content is important to brands and have familiarity with social media platforms and how it's used in the world. I also look for technical aptitude. So bonus points if you've used any of our softwares before, could be, Salesforce, SalesLoft, or Outreach, any of the tech stack that they're going to be using. Having prior knowledge of this will really help them ramp faster. And then I also look for people that are passionate. I don't want to just hire anybody who's just looking for a job or even just looking for an SDR job. I want to make sure that I'm hiring people that want to be an SDR at Shutterstock and have really valid reasons and motivations behind that. So that's a quick overview of my primary and secondary criteria. And this is kind of where the magic comes in. You want to take all of these different criteria and actually boil it down into a winning formula, or really more simply put, a scorecard. Nothing fancy here. I've just put this into an Excel document. I actually think I downloaded the template for this like on Google a few years back, and have sort of developed and iterated over time. But you really want to put your primary criteria in there, and it'll allow you to actually weight those primary criteria as well against a total. And then you also want to have your secondary criteria in there as well. And you might weight those, maybe a little bit less than your primary criteria, but they're still important. And ultimately, all of this together is going to give you a really strong quantitative indicator at the end of every interview of whether or not somebody should move forward in the process. And the key is not to just develop this and have it, but you have to use it ruthlessly. So it's really, really important to be able to not only at the end of every interview, use this with your hiring committee, review it together, review the buckets together. I find this helps us get out of, those hiring biases that we might have, thinking about our gut reaction or whether or not we like somebody, but actually bring the conversation to, something that's a little bit more scientific, which is like, how did this person score in this bucket and why? And those conversations are really, really valuable. And then beyond that, actually iterating on this scorecard consistently. So making sure that, you're actually keeping records of these scorecards for people that you do hire and bring into the company, and then constantly testing them against these as they progress. So every quarter, me and my leadership team do this exercise where we actually look at top performers and lower performers, and we measure them, knowing a little bit more about them now, against these core buckets to make sure and validate to ourselves that we're still measuring for the right things that are going to be indicative of success predictably within Shutterstock. So that's the formula. The last sort of message that I wanted to leave everybody with is that, I hear a lot of the time some SDR leaders like to set up interviews in a really intimidating way to see how SDRs maybe thrive or don't thrive under pressure. And I would actually advise and encourage you not to do that. My style when I'm interviewing SDRs is actually, or potential SDRs, is to actually make them feel as comfortable as possible, because I want them to trust me a little bit, to feel comfortable opening up, and to show me who they truly are at their core. Because in my experience, understanding candidates is far more important, who they are is far more important than what they've actually done in their careers. And I really want to understand the types of people that I'm going to be adding to my team. And pretty much everything outside of that is super coachable. So that is all for me today. It looks like we still have a couple minutes for questions, but I want to thank everybody so much for joining me today. Again, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. I post a whole bunch about this stuff. So yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation there, but we will open it up for some questions now. Let's see, dig in here. So one of the questions is, so do you ask about their approach to self-learning? I would say I poke around this topic. Having self-awareness is definitely really, really important. I would put this in my sort of coachability bucket. And so, a lot of this would be done actually in the presentation phase of the interview process, where I'm seeing how they respond to feedback, even just seeing like how they prepared for the presentation, I find to be really telling when it comes to self-learning. Which testing platform am I using? I'm not using a platform specifically. I actually just give them a prospecting exercise. So I say, pick a company, here's a little bit about Shutterstock, develop an email, a cold call script, voicemail script, and also tell me a little bit why you want to go after the company and the types of people that you want to go after. And it's actually less in those conversations about the content that they deliver back, and actually a lot more so just understanding their thought process and how they actually go through the exercise. Any plans to expand to San Francisco? If I do, I'll definitely hit you up, Cameron, because I love that question. Always be selling, always be closing. But no plans at this time to expand to San Francisco, but I would love any chance to get out to California more. So I'll keep that in mind. From Ashley, how did you ramp up to head a global SDR team, books, etc.? How did I ramp up? So I would say actually mostly through mentorship. That's one of the things I love most about the sales development community, especially. I just find everybody super open to just grabbing half an hour, chatting through problems, issues. So I honestly ramped up to leading a global team really just by tapping into my network, asking tons of questions, having lots of amazing people that I can tap into. However, the first book I actually read when I moved into a sales development leadership role was The Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Broberg. It's, you guys will even see if you read it, some of the concepts that I talked about today are referred to in there. So that I say that was probably the starting point for everything that came after as I expanded my role. How do you keep culture fit from becoming a bias? Ooh, good question, Victor. If I knew the answer to this one, I think I could be helping the world a lot more than just leading an SDR team. I can tell you my 2 cents on this. I think culture really comes down to values, and I think values can be consistent regardless of cultural background. But it's a tricky one, and we constantly are looking for different ways that we can overcome this. I actually interview or introduce a lot of different people into the hiring process to keep me honest on this a little bit. That actually extends to the final stage in our hiring process is actually having one of the existing SDRs meet with the potential candidate. And so I find that just to be a really important step in getting sort of mutual fit and buy-in into the team. But I'm constantly learning about this. I recently read a book called The Culture Map to try to help educate myself a little bit more about how different business practices are, variable in various parts of the world. So, I think it's something that I don't quite have a specific answer for right now, but something that I'm constantly working on trying to do. Oh, lots of questions. There we go. How long do you give an SDR to perform before you start looking to make a change? Love that question. Performance management is extremely important. I think, both for the benefit of the company and the team, but also just to set really clear expectations for the SDR. I think everybody has bad months here and there. I think that happens. Sales is constantly in flux. But usually after 2 months of consistent underperformance, assuming that I have a pretty predictable onboarding process, training process that I've seen other SDRs come out successful from, after 2 months consistently, I'd look to start having performance management type conversations. And usually at the end of month 3, that's when we'd be looking to move to a formal PIP. From Freddie, when hiring for leaders, do you look to develop within, or do you hire leaders externally? What do you look for in a potential team leader manager? That's also a good question, Freddie. So I looked internally as I was starting to expand out my team. So 3 out of the 4 team leads that I have right now they were SDRs who were promoted into their roles. And I really believe in that player coach mentality. I just think the most valuable expertise that SDRs can benefit from is actually just going to come from people who have literally just done the job before and can really empathize with the types of things or the types of situations that they're going through. So I'm a strong advocate in hiring internally, and also just for an additional career path for SDRs. Of course, we want to see them maybe go down the sales track or develop into CSMs, maybe even into marketing. But I also love to have leadership as a career path within my organization as well. From Sean, what kinds of questions do you ask to determine characteristics like grit? That's a good one. It is a tricky one to test for sometimes. it's usually through conversations about their failures or about hard times that they've faced in the past. So even like just asking them, super broadly after COVID, like, how was going through COVID for you? What was that like? And really just getting a gauge on like, are they super negative? How did they handle that time overall? How are they doing since then? But just like really understanding how do they handle tough times? How do they handle change? Questions around that usually are pretty good indicators of grit. Last questions from David. In your opinion, what is the shelf life of a good SDR before they move on to sales? Yes, good question too. So my belief in terms of how you evolve as an SDR on a team is I think like you've got the learning phase, and that's really important. But you really want to hit that sort of plateau of consistent performance before you're ready to move on to that next role. I'm sure a lot of people in here with their teams experience this, that as soon as SDRs are like doing well for like 1 or 2 months, they're like, all right, like I'm ready to go on to the next thing. What's next for me? What's next for me? What's my career path? I really believe to get to that level of mastery to the point where you're actually ready to take that next step, it takes anywhere between 1.5 years to maybe 2 years. But again, I also think it just depends on the business, right? So within my team right now, I have SDRs that are working on Fortune 100 companies with our top enterprise sellers. And that is just an incredible experience. And they're going to learn so much more from that. So it's extended, the shelf life, if you will, of some of those SDRs, maybe a little bit beyond that. But I would say, the 1.5 to 2 year framework as a point of reference for that. Cool. So I think that is all the questions. Again, a huge thank you to everybody for joining today. It was really amazing to see the numbers go up and to have some of the engagement. Really happy to continue the conversation, even just some more virtual hangouts one-on-one or conversations over LinkedIn. And I hope everybody stays healthy and well, and talk to you all soon. Thanks so much.